Hi, and welcome to another edition of our People First interview series, where we shine a light on great companies that not only do interesting and cool work, but most importantly, look after their people. Identify Global is a market leader in personalized career management and talent acquisition, specializing in the legal tech sector with great candidate experience guaranteed. Check out identifyglobal.com for more information on the roles we cover and our latest jobs. This week, I have a very special guest and excited to be joined by Elani Buchan, Venture Lead from MDR LAB. Elani is a leader in building high-growth startups. After earning her MA from King's College London and serving for more than 2 years as a Peace Corps coordinator in Bulgaria, Elani spent almost a decade helping emerging tech companies across various marketplaces, from fintechs to B2B SaaS development, where she's helped optimize, scale their operations, marketing, and people processes. Now, Elani has entered into the world of legal tech startups with MDR LAB. So I thought, who better to give us some insight into emerging tech trends in this transformative space and how MDR LAB is supporting the ecosystem from a people perspective. If you're listening to this and you're not sure who MDR LAB are, they aim to be the home of early stage legal tech. So they work with startups through accelerator programs, investments, and venture building. Hi, Lani. Thanks for coming on. How are you?
Yeah, really well, Pete. Great to be here. Great to be chatting today.
Yeah, fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on, taking some time to speak with me. First and foremost, where are you in the world?
I am in sunny South London currently. Originally from New York, but I've been living in London now for about 10 years.
Yeah, so you've got a fantastic pathway to your role, and very unusual, if you don't mind me saying. So yeah, you mentioned you started out in New York. Tell us about that journey. How have you ended up in London?
Yeah, it was the journey never really made sense to me either. So yes, thanks for acknowledging that it was a bit random. But let me start that again. My journey has always been a bit random. I felt better after reading the book Range. So where I've landed is kind of always the path I think I was meant to take. As you mentioned, I started off in international development work before getting my MA. But quickly realized things didn't change or move fast enough for me. And that's how I got into working in the tech sector. After you mentioned working in tech for about a decade, I was really interested in how companies were getting funded. And I wanted to sit on the other side of the table. So I've worked in a couple of different accelerator programs, looking at blockchain projects and Web3 technology. And then I stumbled on MDR LAB. And there's a lot of white space in legal tech. There's a lot of emerging companies, emerging tech, and emerging use cases that I just thought to be really compelling. And I just thought that MDR and MDR LAB was really at the forefront of driving that technology and that change. That's kind of how I got there. Yeah.
So you mentioned wanting to sit the other side of the table. I see that you're involved in this thing called Included VC. What's that all about?
So Included VC. So when I first started my desire to be in venture, I was told you need to have an MBA, you need to have a private equity background. And if you talk to most people, I'm either described as stubborn or tenacious, depending on who you speak to. But I just didn't believe that needed to be my path. So I got involved in an initiative called Included VC, which aims to drive underrepresented or people from underrepresented backgrounds into venture capital. And so we work with VCs across Europe, like Notion, which recently led the Series B in Brighter, which is a legal tech company, but then also companies like Seedcamp, Daphne, Creandum, who invested in Spotify. So really, really great VCs across Europe, giving you a crash course in how to invest.
Wow. Okay. What a fantastic initiative. I mean, you wouldn't think that that maybe diversity was even an issue in that sort of area. So getting people from underrepresented backgrounds into venture capitalism. It's complete new one on me. What's the success like of that? I mean, does it go well? I mean, clearly you're a product of that.
So it's only in its second year. I was in the inaugural test batch, but we're seeing, I would have to say from my cohort, I think probably of about 30 of us, probably about a third have entered venture, and these are all people without backgrounds, traditional VC backgrounds, and traditional VC profiles. So what I've realized is that you really need to have a diverse set of perspectives at the table to overcome different biases and perspectives when looking at deals that you may invest in, which will overall impact the entire startup ecosystem.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, excellent news. So tell us a little bit about MDR Lab. What is it, and why is it so important to Mishcon?
Yeah. So MDR Lab is the venture / innovation arm of Mishcon de Brea. What we do in the lab is we have basically 3 arms that make up the lab. The first is the accelerator programs that you mentioned, and we run 2 different types of accelerator programs. One is around idea stage, so really early founders who have an idea about a company but don't really know how to get off the ground. And then we have a later stage program that focuses on companies that have a product, but they're looking on how to get product market fit. So that's our program arm. Our second arm is standalone investments. So looking at how we can just invest into companies that maybe aren't strategically aligned with what we are working on or priorities within the firm, but areas where we see a lot of growth and potential. And then the third arm is around our venture studio and venture building. So we are currently partnered with an organization called Founders Factory, and we are looking at how we build startups in-house. They are generally the idea we're cooking on right now, and hopefully we'll be able to talk more about it soon, is associated to legal and underlying around what it means to be an employee, and that's where the idea originated from. But it isn't necessarily a tool that we will be using within the firm. So we are looking to work across the spectrum of ideas and stages within legal tech. But not solely focused on things that need to be used within the firm, even though that is primarily our priority. So that kind of drives into why it's important to Mishcon, is when we look at what the future of law firms look like, what the future of the industry looks like. One, we see technology being very a key and pivotal role in that future. So how do we stay on top of the latest technology? How and should we be building our own in-house? And how do we make investments in companies that are going to be the future? When we also think about what the future of a law firm looks like, we're not sure if it looks like what a law firm looks like today. So how do we diversify our services as well? And the lab is playing around with that.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously, Mishcon are in the legal world, so they're able to get involved in what's happening. Normally, it's some government-backed program or another venture capitalist sort of accelerator type program. So I guess you guys can probably support the innovation, with real world examples, and also keep an eye on what's emerging. So I mean, do you support innovation? How do you do that? Or you're not just another accelerator program, are you?
No. And I would say, one of the ways that we are supporting innovation, particularly through our accelerator programs, is that what we think we can offer to the companies that come through our programs is unparalleled access to the people they actually want using their products. Like, is there a better way to innovate than actually getting your hands into your target user and spending 12 weeks with them? And also making sure that these companies have funding, looking into how we can support innovation through providing investment, I think is key. I think I've seen there are loads of accelerator programs, and I know that there are also equally emerging legal tech accelerators. I think what our difference is the entrepreneurial lens that the lab has. I think that we are different in my background. I am not a lawyer, and no one in the lab is a lawyer. So we we are more focused on entrepreneurs, and we take that lens to it. And I think that's what sets us apart to some of the programs out there. I can speak to what it feels like to wake up every day excited to solve a problem that you're just really passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I've been involved in lots of accelerator programs, from a supporting perspective, whether it's recruitment or, getting their names out there and things like that. And some of them are really good, and some of them are terrible. Actually, they're in fact, I've seen hardly any of the people that have gone through that program go on to make it. And, it seems like you guys are really supporting that. So, yeah, it's fantastic that you've got that blend. And I think it's important, especially in the legal tech world, that it's one of those ones where you need that content knowledge to be able to solve, to understand the problem, if you like. You can't just come in and say, well, I've got this new gadget and hope that legal profession is going to take it on board. You need to have that knowledge, but then you also need that outside knowledge to be able to say, well, okay, this is makes it commercial, and usable. And I've seen some of them go on to provide services into other sectors as well. On that note, I mean, what trends are you seeing in the legal tech space right now? If someone had a new idea, where do you see potential market growth? Any specific area of legal tech?
Yeah, so I mean, to the first point around kind of trends, we're seeing a lot in contract lifecycle management, so CLM systems.
Yeah.
And as different flavors of that, we'll see a lot in document automation, collaboration tools, compliance tools, things like that. And so, yes, I feel like the market is very saturated, and it's a lot of players all bumping around the same ideas, but you can slightly differentiate there. But that is also equally where a lot of money is going right now. Yeah. So, there's a push and pull there of it's highly saturated, but money's going there.
Yeah.
So I would say if somebody is looking at starting something in that space, just being very clear about how they're going to differentiate themselves from everybody else that's playing in the market. So yeah, I do see potential for growth, but right now what we're also trying to figure out is who's going to emerge from all of these different players. Another area that I'm really excited about is the rise of B2C, so business to consumer legal tech companies. Okay. Been looking at this quite a bit in the US, and it gets branded as justice tech, but it's about, how can you remove friction from people who are for people who are unable to access legal services through a law firm. So I'm starting to see companies crop up in the UK, and it's a market that I'm closely watching, and I think a lot of people will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Not quite the same, but it's similar to this sort of wills, people being able to do wills via tech, and actually,
exactly.
And I think it's absolutely required. I mean, and I can talk from firsthand experience. Certainly from being a business owner, is sometimes you want to be able to get advice, simply, quickly. Not have to go through the whole process of, it's very formal, process of going into a law firm, isn't it?
Exactly. And we were talking, I've been speaking to some other legal tech investors recently. And when we talk about consumer behavior, consumers want to engage with something like it's a SaaS product. You want to go on your Airbnb and book a room. You want to be able just to do everything from your phone. And like I used a product online to write my will. So you see people wanting to do this. And so, again, the amount of people who are self-representing in court and civil court, employee tribunals, family law, that number is increasing. So I'm just looking at companies that are starting to operate in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And fantastic. I think if legal tech can go some way to improving that area, because I think that's probably the biggest value add it could add, because at the minute it's very internally facing, is optimization for the law, but it's got to naturally reach out to the users of legal services, right? So
exactly. And I think there's a lot of potential both in how law firms operate and how products are improving efficiencies and saving, either increasing revenues or saving money, but then there's also the consumer side, which hasn't gotten as much attention in the UK and Europe as it has in the US.
Yeah, absolutely. So to quote a a stat you put on one of your blogs. The UK is a hub of European legal technology, with UK startups making up 44% of all legal tech startups in the European Union, which I was unaware of. So has Brexit slowed down this innovation, or has it not had any impact? What's the situation there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So from what I can see so far, and I'm pretty sure I wrote that blog post, it hasn't. And what I think is equally interesting and important, and why I'm like wanting to double down on legal tech, is companies don't seem to be leaving the UK, or rather legal tech companies don't seem to be leaving the UK in the way that you're finding other companies setting up their headquarters in Amsterdam and Germany. The UK is still like the consumption of legal services here, and how it sets the tone for so many different jurisdictions is still quite it's still quite strong and apparent. So what I'm seeing as well is that the UK is also quicker to adopt legal technology than, say, the US. I speak to startups out in the US all the time, and they're looking to the UK as like their first customers rather than locally. Right. So like I don't think Brexit has slowed down innovation in this space, at least to this point. It's hard to predict what will happen in the future, but I still see legal tech having a very strong home in the UK and attracting hopefully even more talent.
Yeah, fantastic. So you've seen a lot of startups, and you would have seen all manner of ideas and people that come through. So have you developed an eye for people that come through your door, and can you go, that they're going to make it? Is that
no, and anybody who tells you they do or they can, don't trust them. Don't trust them for a second. Charlatans. It's so hard to tell if somebody's going to make it or not. Like, you can have your own internal gut feeling of, oh, I really like this company and I really want them to make it, or really like this idea, I want it to work. But you just don't know. Like, you don't know what the market, and this is why venture is the riskiest asset class there is because you just don't know. I think it's easier, and kind of on the flip side of that though, I think it's easier to tell who won't make it. It's hard being a founder, and you have to constantly driving and pushing and asking the right questions and being really laser focused on the problem that you're trying to solve. And you can see it in people who don't get that. So I guess, I think I don't think it's easy to spot the people who will make it. I think it's a bit easier to spot the people who definitely won't. So maybe that's contradicting myself slightly, but
no, I know what you mean. Yeah, because I mean, everyone starts off, motivated in the early stages, don't they? Because it's all exciting and new. But and actually, it is that when the idea has matured, you've then got to deliver on that, and that's where the hard work starts, isn't it? And it's like you say, being completely focused on. Because before you know it, someone else says, "Oh, it'd be nice if you could do this," and then you starburst off in lots of different places, trying to be all things to all people.
Yeah. So it completely. And as you grow and develop as a company, the needs on a founder and a team can vary and be very different. So it really depends on how the founder is able to flex with those change, how people react to feedback, how they respond to rejection. These are things that you don't necessarily think about, but can be quite telling in conversations with people.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of this. The founders and the managing directors now of more mature companies, they've typically always come from a legal background in some format or another. Is that still the case within the people that are coming through your program?
And yes, so the majority of people, I would say, that come through our programs have had some kind of experience within a law firm, either as or rather practicing as a lawyer. So we've had general counsels, we have people who worked in legal ops, things like that. So they've had, for the majority of them, they have had experience. What I try to look for in a cohort, though, is diversity of experience. So we also have people who haven't had that experience or background in a law firm. So I think it's a balance of trying to find people who've been really close to the problem and have a good idea of what it looks like, but also the crazy out of the box thinkers, like who have an idea about a problem that there's there, but they haven't been close enough to it. They have to work a lot harder to validate that idea and that problem. But I think it's really important to include different perspectives when trying to find people who are trying to solve problems.
Yeah. It's interesting, and I'm keen to know, and if you don't worry if you don't know the answer to this, but yeah. What does diversity look like in the legal tech innovation incubator environment? What is it a problem?
Yeah, I think it is. To speak to more of my experience than the different programs that are out there. Traditionally, as I mentioned, we are primarily getting applications from people who have some experience as lawyers. And so that narrows the pool already. And there isn't as much diversity. It's something that at MDR is a focus on a priority, and including increasing diversity within the firm. Yeah. But it's hard. It's hard in terms of finding diverse perspectives and talent. That being said, it's equally important, because I want to ensure that the next generations of products and services that are being built are being built from an inclusive perspective, and being built with everyone in mind, especially if, as I mentioned, we were thinking about the B2C space. What happens if you leave out a significant portion of women, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic founders? You leave out a big population of the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I read another interesting stat the other day, that the UK average for Black entrepreneurs is around 0.24%. So have you got any interesting stats on how many sort of BAME, women or founders with neurodiversity have come through your program and their success?
So interestingly enough, it wasn't until I joined that we started actually tracking that. So I made it an optional question to fill in on our application forms if people wanted to self-report in any diverse perspective. So acknowledging neurodiversity, gender, if they're LGBTQ, I think it's really important to capture that information. To our most recent cohort of that early stage program called Launch, I would say we had the cohort was majority underrepresented founders. So out of the 5, we had 3, which I think, I think was very intentional. And we had to work hard to get those numbers and make sure that we weren't reaching out again to the existing networks of people within the firm, because if you're using that as your pipeline, you're not going to get diverse founders in. And also to that point, even though we're running this program in the UK, and we have people living in the UK, it's majority immigrants as well. So I think that was another interesting stat to capture. None of them would identify as British nationals. So there's a lot of interesting ideas around them.
And this might be, again, another impossible question, but does the MDR LAB, MDR, or, how do you actively encourage or support possible innovators from these groups? How do you do it? Where do you start?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, what my objective has been is to reach out to people in my own network and people who I know who are trying to tackle what diversity in the tech ecosystem looks like, just to say, hey, we're here. Because as much as I like to think of MDR LAB as the leading legal tech program, a lot of people didn't know we exist. So I spent a lot of time in lots of Slack groups for female founders, underrepresented founders, just saying, hey, we're here. And we are going to think about how we're marketing ourselves and positioning it. Because right now, again, most of the ways that people know about us is through our network or referrals from our program. So again, I think to actively encourage or support people from underrepresented backgrounds, you have to put in work, and you have to actively be looking for these diverse voices.
Yeah. Well, this goes out to our candidate network. So, here's your opportunity.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give people listening to this who think they have a great legal tech idea? Where do they start, and what is the absolute minimum you would need to get them started?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. I think if you have a great legal tech idea, start validating it. I think people keep it to themselves too often. Start talking to everybody who will listen, even if they think it's annoying or you think it's annoying. You really have to drive down into that problem and see where it leads you. Because to that point as well, don't focus on the solution just yet. Like, you think you may have the solution, but in my experience, the first thing that people start building is not the thing that they end up selling. So just make sure that you are talking to people. In terms of like the minimum you need to get started, that's a great question.
You need lots of money?
You don't need lots of money, no. It's difficult, because I wonder where you consider getting started. Like, getting started is as easy as talking to people. If you want to start building, then that's different, and you have to think about the commitments there. Do you want to be recruiting a co-founder to work with you? That's another question you have. But figure out. I would say, get started by talking to people about this and validating this, and then figure out, okay, is this something I want to take forward? And if it is, making a plan for that. And if it's not, shelve it. It's okay to bin ideas and move on to something new.
I think, that's it. That is such a critical point in any business, actually, is talking to your customer or potential customer and saying,
completely,
what are your biggest problems? What are your biggest challenges? Does this solve that? Because I think, if you can come up with a great idea, and if you're a good salesperson, and some people will just go, that sounds good, probably use that. But actually, when it comes down to purchasing something and going through that process, it's a completely different consideration. What if I did this, would it help you? The short answer might be it would be. Okay, well, how would it help you? Does it save you time? Does it save you money? Is it a real problem? Is it in your top 5 issues? If it's not, then it's probably, whilst it might be a good idea, it's not a long-term business or viable business plan potentially, unless those problems start raising up to the top, 1 to 5. So it's one of the biggest things that I've learned in business is to speak to your customers, understand what their problems are, and solve those problems, and not try to sell them a problem with product that you've got, if that makes sense. So.
Exactly. Constantly be talking to your customers, or the people who think would be your customers. Before they're even your customers. If you're trying to solve a really evident pain point for a lot of people, then they'll want to talk to you about that pain point. So just make sure that you're driving into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what support mechanisms, if any, are in place for people? If they've got an idea, you can have people like single parents, people with disabilities, physical or neuro, disabilities. Do you have support mechanisms in place for people like that to support them through their ideas?
Another really great question that I am also still trying to work through. I think, from my perspective, what we offer is, or what I try to offer is a safe environment where people can tell me what they need. So none of the programs that we run are extremely rigid. As I think I mentioned earlier, is that I'm really focused on the entrepreneur and the individual. And it's hard for anybody to build in requirements for everyone. But that being said, everything that we have built, we can change. So part of it, I'm not a single parent, but I am a parent. And so I understand the need for flexible working, or working at, we're exploring asynchronous communications. Why do meetings need to happen at a certain time? Can't we just deliver the information in a different way for you to consume as and when you need to? And same with people who have disabilities or other needs. What can we do to make sure that experience is right for them? People who have maybe there's a language barrier, how can we consume? I know that I'm more of a visual learner than I am just listening to people. So how do we even just make sure that we are adapting and adapting to people's different needs and working styles? So, while we have a baseline of a program, I get that challenge by founders and entrepreneurs all the time. And that, I appreciate that because like you said, there's a lot of really terrible accelerator programs out there that are also viewed as quite predatory. And so even founders that aren't suitable for the program, I'm talking to them and saying, this is our model. What do you think is wrong with it? And how would you fix it? So I'm constantly trying to learn on how we can improve things for all types of founders, and looking for it in, always looking for feedback. So if anybody wants to share any, I'm always happy to chat.
And it's tough, right? And I speak from experience. Having family members that are neurodiverse, and it's nobody is the same, right?
Completely.
As the saying goes, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, and so I think that the message here, and that came across loud and clear there, is that you're there to help, and you're completely open to those environments. You're a product of support yourself, and clearly you're championing that within MDR LAB as well, which I think is fantastic. So, if you're listening to this again and, you have a great idea and, you're not sure where to start, then, reach out to Elani.
Yes, please do. Always happy to chat to people.
Fantastic. So, 2 quick fire questions. I always finish on these. Okay. So buckle in. So top 3 tips for getting your legal tech startup off the ground.
Okay. Oh, yes. Great question. So number 1, I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier, was focus on the problem. I think people are too obsessed with focusing on the solution and the fancy, shiny thing that they're building. So just drill down on the problem nonstop. 2, build a network. Networking is going to be valuable in terms of finding your potential customers, but equally advisors, people that you might want to hire. That is where I first look whenever I'm hiring somebody, is seeing who I know already or who can make a referral. And 3 is don't wait. If you have identified this problem, chances are somebody else has. So get to it right now before someone else does.
That's it. Yeah. And top 3 common misconceptions you hear why people need their idea in a startup.
Yeah. Oh, another really good one. So probably number 1 is, do I need to be technical? People think that they can't get started because they need to know how to code. That's not true. We're living in a world where no code is blowing up. So no, you don't need to be technical to get started. Just have the vision. Second point, I think you raised earlier, do you need loads of money? Again, money always helps, but you can do this on the side, bootstrap. Are you in a position to and I don't want to make assumptions, but ask friends and family, but think about how you can do it without any money. And then to the third point, which kind of ties into the second one, is people think it's too risky. And again, if you can do this on the side of your current job, or you can take a bit of sabbatical, what can you do to de-risk it? And what is the risk if you don't do it? Are you going to just sit back and look at regret, as opposed to knowing that you tried it? So figuring out how to de-risk, and if not, what does it mean to you not to try?
Fantastic. Love that. Elani, it was fantastic. It was really, really nice talking to you, and some really great insight into to the accelerator and startup world. So again, if you're listening to this and you would like more information, or even just a conversation, I'm sure Elani would be welcome a conversation with you. So we'll include the contact details and link in the podcast links. So please check them out. And Elani, it was fantastic. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you again, Pete. It was great being here.